So welcome everyone. My name is Chris Gettle. I'm Vice President of Product Management for Ivanti's Exposure Management Product Group. So this includes kind of an expanding group of products. Our patch management solutions, of course, our risk-based vulnerability management and external attack surface management solutions, which RBVM is what we're going to be talking about a little bit more in depth today. But all of that comes together in a larger exposure management portfolio. And joining me today is VJ, who's the staff product manager and product manager specifically for our risk-based vulnerability management and external attack surface management products. So thanks, VJ, for joining. And today we're going to go through just a high-level discussion of exposure management and how risk-based vulnerability management and ASPM come into play in that larger exposure management world. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the Neurons platform, and then we'll jump into a demo where VJ is going to show us a bit more of the specifics of the product. So starting off, a little bit about exposure management and how this kind of is bringing multiple pieces together to really help us evolve vulnerability management to a next level here. So exposure management, I think of this as a expansion on vulnerability management. So if you've been working on this for a while, you may have seen or heard several different terms, things like CASM, cyber asset attack surface management. This is the need to get better asset visibility across our organizations. Over the past 5 years, the security team has been taking a more vested interest in the asset programs within your organization. The reason for that is asset visibility is essential to understand exactly what all of your exposures are. There's a lot more focus around full visibility, the types of assets you have, the different attack surfaces that you have. So traditional vulnerability management focuses on your infrastructure, servers, workstations, maybe some of the devices within our organization. External attack surface management was an additional perspective that looked from an outside in to get more of a perspective of what threat actors can see, the tech stack that we're presenting to the world, all of those types of exposures. Now with the heavy shift over to cloud, we have cloud configuration as another attack surface. So bringing those pieces together helps us to better understand our overall exposure. Things like our development or part of our organizations. So Ivanti, of course, we've got over 70 products that we're building and delivering to the market, but many of you have web interfaces, mobile apps, other platforms or products that your own development teams are building and delivering to your users internally or externally, your customers. So bringing those into view as well, that's where we're going to talk about ASPM today, that more application level view of exposures within your organization. And really, this is shifting more to a proactive form of cybersecurity. Vulnerability management traditionally is more reactive. This is trying to shift to a more proactive approach to this. So it's commonly governed by a continuous threat exposure management, what Gartner refers to this market as CTEM. That's the shift to try to bring all these pieces together. But as you're looking at that, really exposure management has kind of 4 key areas that are a mind shift or an evolution on what we're dealing with. It's bringing asset more directly into this experience. Full asset visibility is very important. Vulnerability management traditionally is focused on the known knowns about our environment. I know about a device. I know what exposures it has. I'm managing it with vulnerability management. Vulnerability management didn't really tackle the known unknowns or the unknown unknowns about our environment. So a known unknown would be, it's a device I know about, it's in my environment somewhere, but I don't have visibility into what exposures are on it. Or unknown unknowns. Do I have some way of going after and trying to identify more of the unknowns? If you look at, Gartner actually did a survey this last year that identified only about 17% of enterprises are able to get up to a 95% asset visibility across their organization. Discovery, or that larger CASM use case really is a struggle for a lot of organizations. So exposure management is going to focus on identifying and bringing more of those assets through that journey from unknown unknown to known unknown to known known. And that's where we want to be. We want to get that device to be known and the exposures on it to be known. The attack surface, again, bringing in multiple attack surfaces together. This is where RBVM and bringing ASPM into that experience really helps to ensure that we're bringing multiple streams of vulnerability findings into purview for the business to be able to understand what's going on. And then we can get to understanding our cyber exposures. With that, with good scoring, with identifying, when findings came up, when they've been remediated, we can start to understand if we're keeping our risk level within our defined risk appetite. So risk appetite is another term that's becoming a larger focus of the exposure management mind shift. Traditional vulnerability management spoke about things in terms of compliance or SLAs. Risk appetite is taking this a step further. It's really trying to define what levels of risk the business is willing to tolerate and what levels of risk falling outside of that is a bad situation. And from there, we're prepared to make decisions more quickly. We used to talk about things in terms of a out of band. So if something releases and it's posing a giant risk to the business, we would do an out of band maintenance window to remediate that vulnerability. 0-day response is a different approach to that. It's a more proactive approach. And defining your risk appetite helps you to be able to make that shift over to responding to things in more of a 0-day response mode. That means that you've already made the decision. You know when a vulnerability needs to be responded to sooner versus when a vulnerability can wait until our regular maintenance. And when the time comes, you've already got the tools in place, the people identified, and the processes, so that when you turn that switch on and you go into 0-day response mode, you are responding quickly and efficiently and not having to drop everything and have a whole bunch of people disrupting their normal work to get that effort complete. So the Ivanti approach to exposure management, we've got several of these pieces already. Understanding your attack surface, being able to bring in that asset discovery and inventory. The Ivanti Neurons platform has a very strong discovery and asset visibility perspective. Making sure that we can bring that in and prioritize more effectively. RBVM, ASPM, the inclusion of our threat intelligence or vulnerability intel gives us the ability to better prioritize and respond to the risks in our environment. A stronger scoring methodology, a way to understand beyond a 10-point score for an individual vulnerability called CVSS that has many limitations, a risk-adjusted scoring methodology and a way to score multiple vulnerabilities against a single asset or group of assets is very important to be able to better prioritize. The last piece, remediation. This is where a lot of times the vulnerability management side would pass off and let IT then take care of the remediation step. Exposure management is trying to bring these things full circle to make sure remediation is part of this process, and the IT resources that need to take those actions have a seat at the table as well. And this is a group working together cross-functionally, cross-tool sets, cross-data silos to execute this end-to-end more proactively. Now, today's conversation, we're going to get into one specific part of exposure management. So there's exposure assessment, the different visibility pieces like the asset side, EASM from an external perspective. There's the aggregation of different vulnerability sources like your vulnerability scanners, whatever scanner you're using, the application scanners, those types of solutions all come into the RBVM platform and get prioritized. And then there's the handoff, of course, over to the exposure remediation side. There's playbooks, workflows, other pieces of the RBVM experience that helps you to make that handoff over to the IT organization, where you might be doing patch remediation or a configuration change. You may be handing it off to a team through the ticketing system to make sure that the development team gets it in their backlog, or a business line team gets a ticket to inform them of what needs to be done, or maybe the network security team is informed of network devices that need to be updated. Each of those are different remediation streams that we want to keep track of. Most organizations lose those in email and have a hard time keeping track of that. So just a kind of a high level overview here quick before we jump into the demo. You've got the different external sources that you may have throughout your environment. Today, again, we're going to talk a lot about the vulnerability scanners and application scanners coming together in the RBVM platform. But there's other sources like assets, asset solutions, discovery, pieces like that that come together to give you that full exposure management view of your world. All assets, all findings, giving you that kind of complete holistic view. The risk-based prioritization and the other workflows to help drive remediation. That's the RBVM and ASPM demo we're going to see today, that piece of the puzzle. And then the vulnerability intel that feeds into that. And then we'll be touching on some of the capabilities like the workflows and playbooks that help you drive that finding out to the proper remediation stream. So on that note, Vijay, if you are ready to go.
To start off, before we see RBVM in action, the main focus area which Chris was adhering to is the aggregation and prioritization piece. That's where Ivanti Neurons for risk-based vulnerability management and ASPM, these two products come into picture. Okay. So when we talk about the ingestion of data, so starting from network vulnerability scanners to SAST and DAS tools, as you can see, and even ticketing systems, like even including Ivanti Neurons for ITSM, we have, I think, around 70 plus integrations available in Ivanti Neurons for RBVM and ASPM. So, but the real value is once the data is ingested, as you can see here, I'll try to show you using this ransomware funnel. So this is one of the dashboards available in the product, right? So once the data is ingested from these connectors, you can be using a Qualys, Rapid7, or even a Tenable security center. So once from these various sources, the findings and the hosts and the application data is ingested, what you get is a very prioritized view of these findings and vulnerabilities. If you see, most of the time goes for security teams into normalizing this data, triaging through it, and at the same time identifying what is critical and most important, not just in terms of the standard CVSS score, which doesn't take into context your organization's risk requirements. Very contextual data is not available if you go by mere CVSS scores, right? Because it is an industry level metric that organization specific context is not available. So we are going to discuss few things here. For example, again, coming back, let us look at this example of a ransomware funnel. Okay, so in your organization, starting with total findings of around 900K plus ransomware findings, if you see how the prioritization functionality in the product narrows it down to those with specific RCE, as in remote code exploits or privilege escalation exploits, because these are the ones which are of high risk. They can be triggered remotely by hackers, taking control of your systems and encrypting them, right? And within these, also Ivanti Neurons Vulnerability KB has threat feeds coming on what are the trending ransomwares. So basically, if you see from 900K plus, 912K to be specific, it has narrowed it down to 633 findings. So if you click on that, it will take you to the list view, which shows all the host findings, where you can go through them. But ultimately, when you have to take an action in terms of remediation, what you can do, so using the integration present between Ivanti Neurons for RBVM and patch products, you can directly assign them to an existing patch group, or you can even create a new patch group. So I'm going to use, for this demo purpose, there is an already existing patch group I have created. So I'm just going to add these to that patch group. So now what would happen is these findings would be mapped to the relevant patches by your organization's patch admin. They're going to be tested and the patches are going to be applied. So what you have seen right now is with a few clicks, you have taken high risk ransomware vulnerabilities in your organization's environment and you have assigned that to the patch team. So consider and compare it to your manual approach where your security teams have to go through such a vast amount of data and spend a lot of time and effort in terms of prioritization and orchestrating them with the patch teams for remediation. So slightly extending that, now let us also look at another dashboard in Ivanti Neurons for RBVM. Uh, and let us try to take a slightly do-it-yourself approach now, okay? But before that, okay, so this is a prioritization dashboard, okay, as you can see, which actually shows how many findings are open, how many findings are closed, so that your security teams can focus on where the efforts are most required. As you can see here, again, it narrows down from the total number of findings to what is more important or of what is of high risk nature. So, and also what you can do is using this quick interactions menu where I'm pointing to, you can even select the different asset types, a host or an application. So basically, when we talk about hosts, this is your IT infrastructure. Okay, all the host findings are related to your IT infrastructure, and remediation is the responsibility of the IT team here. And when we talk about applications, these are findings or vulnerabilities from your application stack, and fixes or remediation should happen typically are done by the development team. So that is on the asset types. Again, so we have two scoring metrics you can choose from. One is the VRR score and another is the severity. So severity, again, when we talk about severity, severity is nothing but it's the highest of the CVSS scores. So any finding in RBVM is associated with one or more CVEs or vulnerabilities. So when if you select severity, it takes into account the highest CVSS score. But we also have something called VRR score, which is a risk metric, which is Ivanti's patented risk metric, which not just takes into account the CVSS ratings as a base score, but also factors in the trending ransomware and the malware and exploit security research, all the contextual data, and comes up with a risk rating. Okay, I'll show you in a moment. So this is on, so you can select, you can even customize these dashboards in terms of what asset type you need and what scoring metric you need. Okay, so for now I'll select host and VRR and click on apply. So for now, if you can see, let me go with let me click on, for the demo purpose, I've clicked on the total number of open findings in my organization's environment. Okay, so there you go, you are seeing 955,000 total open findings. Okay, so obviously now I want to narrow it down. Okay, so what we have in terms of filtering available is various filters and various system views that help you narrow down these vulnerabilities and help you narrow down what is high risk, which vulnerabilities pose the highest risk to your organization's security posture. Okay, so what I'm going to do right now, so among these, if I see the first level of filter I'm going to apply is, if you see here, this bar is the KPIs. So I'm going to click on how many are the overdue findings among this total open findings. So of course, from a compliance point of view, in terms of SLA timelines, it's important I focus on the overdue findings, right? So that has brought it down to 791,000 findings. So after this, what I'm going to do is, we have readily available system views. For example, CISA KEVs. So we have a system view on CISA KEVs, which takes into account the latest recommendations in terms of CISA known exploitable vulnerabilities. If I apply this system view, it further narrows it down to all the findings in my environment which are associated with these KEVs. So you can see Now I'm at 16K findings. So again, quickly on system use, most of your organization's vulnerability management requirements, a system use should be available. But if you don't find it, you can also use something called user views, and you can create a view that suits with your vulnerability management requirements. Okay, so both are available. So even you have one for patch Tuesday. So every month there is a system view which is updated for the latest patch Tuesday findings as well. So now beyond this, if I have to narrow it down more on the asset criticality, if I have to bring in this asset criticality to the picture, if you can see there's a group by option here. I can group all the findings based on asset criticality. Asset criticality is nothing but how critical is the asset to my business operations, right? And now I'm going to pivot on those findings, as you can see here, which are most critical. So these are the findings which are associated with my most critical assets. So if you can see, we have narrowed it down to a significant extent. Okay, so but still, this is a handful for me to hand it over to the patch team. So let us apply a few more filters. Excuse me. So let us review the filtering criteria I have applied till now. So one is the CISA KV system view that helped me narrow down my vulnerabilities. And at the same time, I was able to only look at those findings which are beyond the due date assigned by my organization. And at the same time, I also applied asset criticality pivot, which gave me only those findings which are associated with my most critical assets. On top of that, I'm only seeing those which has trending threads, meaning there is a sense of urgency associated with this. So let me also see what are those findings which has patches. So if you apply this patch, so yeah, I think so we are at 314 findings now. So imagine where we started, total open findings 955K, and we were able to narrow this down to 314 findings. So now there are two ways. What I can do is, if I want to hand it over to my IT ops team, we have already seen how to add them to a patch group, but we also have connectors associated with ticketing systems. So for this demo, I'm going to use ITSM, Ivanti Neurons for ITSM. So I can even create tickets associated with all these findings. So there are 314 findings, 314 tickets will be created in my ITSM product, which then IT ops team will work on them and take them towards remediation. But we also have a feature recently introduced where you can even automate this whole process of the ticket creation. Let me just quickly show you that. So once you create a collection in your RBVM product, what you can do is you can enable automatic ticket creation. So yeah, again, there are options to assign these findings to specific users within the product. That can be done. And there are also options to assign them to patch or ITSM products, like you were seeing. Yeah, just a moment. Just give me a moment. So yeah, so this is how I can configure a specific collection for auto ticketing. So let us take, so collection is nothing but a grouping for findings. So this is a one-time setup which can be done. For example, I have selected a specific collection of findings, and I'm configuring now for auto ticketing using Ivanti Neurons for ITSM. So I can even determine whether I want any attachment along with the ticket that is going to be created on my ticketing system, which is what you can see, the format of the attachment. And that you can also configure the status sync settings between RBVM and ASPM in this case. So you can even determine or put in place an expiry date after which the auto ticketing will stop, and you can submit. So what this does is whenever there are new findings associated to your collection, like in my case, what I did is any CISA KV finding, I want automatically tickets to be created. So there is no manual intervention required once this is done. Tomorrow, next month, next week, for every CISA KV finding, there is an automatic ticket generation that happens so that there is no oversight. That's about it. So with that, let us quickly go back and also have a look at the executive dashboard, okay? Because it's important. There are few metrics. So one more important metric in terms of risk prioritization is Ivanti's RS3 score. So what it does is it presents on a scale of 300 to 850, more like your credit score. What is the risk posed by your organization's asset inventory at an overall level? If you see here, the higher the score, the less risk it is. What it does is, for example, just to show you the methodology, right? So it factors in 4 different aspects. One is the vulnerability risk rating, which we spoke about, which we talked about. Also, the asset criticality of the underlying assets, meaning the business criticality part, and also the accessibility, meaning whether it's an internal asset or an external asset, it factors in that as well. And also the vulnerability KB threat intelligence also is factored in, and this score is calculated. So what it gives is to executives the high level risk rating for your organization is showed. For example, in this case, we are at a slightly higher risk in this demo environment. So along with that, same, you have this prioritization funnel also. So if you see here again, same, starting from total open findings, if you see starting from 1.2 million approximately, this brings it down to 1006 actually. So this is the value RBVM brings into the vulnerability management process. So I think few more additional capabilities it's important. One is the ability to automate all these actions, okay, using playbooks. So whatever actions we have seen in host findings, application findings, right? Instead of doing them manually, that those can be automated using playbooks. This is a very powerful feature. So actions like adding a tag, assigning them to specific users within the product, changing the due dates, everything can be automated. So those automation abilities are present in the product. Let us just see an example here. Let me just create a playbook. Let me say tag critical assets. So I can even configure this to be run at any time of the day. Let us take end of the day. I want something to be run daily end of the day. Okay, so I have created this new playbook. So I'm going to open this. So every playbook runs on a set of rules. So I have to configure a rule for it. So let me say I want to apply a tag for this group of assets. So I'm going to pick a tag called most critical. And I need to pick a filter. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pick those systems which are running Windows operating system and which has ransomware related vulnerabilities on them. Okay. So what this will do, and I can even set the notification type by email or with specific messages so that the users receive it on their email inboxes, right? So for this, so I have created a playbook rule that can automatically apply the most critical tag to all the Windows computers which have ransomware vulnerabilities. I can submit. Okay. One sec, yeah. Tag ransomware assets, demo, submit. Yep. So, and it's, yeah, once I enable this tool, this comes into picture. So From now on, the filter gets automatically any new Windows system, even that is newly added to my organization's inventory, which is having a ransomware, this playbook will pick it up and apply this tag. So applying tag is just one of the actions. As you might have seen, there are a lot of other actions. Okay. So let me disable this to be able to edit this again. So as you can see, this is just one of apply tag is just one of the actions. There are more powerful actions like you can even remove the due date as in the which is related to the SLA. You can even update the business criticality. So in the interest of time, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap up by quickly showing you a few more capabilities. Like for example, you have even workflows. So what we have seen in playbooks, similar capabilities, workflows are available. Meaning if you want your findings to be set as false positives or to be set as already remediated or for risk acceptance. So these are specific outcomes you can even configure workflows. That's a very powerful feature available. And also we talked about auto ticketing, and just to round this off, it has various notification types, meaning for every action you can even configure these notifications. Even for new ransomware findings, you can configure notifications where you can be alerted on email or in platform. Even for change in RS3 score for a group of assets, you can even set up a specific notification type. And just to round off this demo, last I'll show you the vulnerability KB database. This is an additional SKU, but whatever we discussed earlier, right? The main threat context in terms of what are those trending vulnerabilities, what are those OS top 10 CVE, the software weaknesses, top 10 software weaknesses, all these are available in vulnerability KB. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Vijay. So we did have just a couple of quick questions. One of them was around automation, which I think that came out right before you started jumping into some of the automated workflows. So a really good question. I think we touched on a couple of ways: the workbooks, the workflows, the playbooks, different ways that you can automatically assign things as they come in, and also triggering notifications so that an analyst can be informed when something new that might warrant their attention comes up. So a few different things there that we touched on. One of the other ones that's commonly asked is, oh, it looks like I can hand off, specific CVEs over to the patch workflow. Yes, we can absolutely do that. Vijay showed that at a high level. A lot of times your patch team is running in parallel with the security team doing this. So, most of the time when that handoff is needed, it's when you're going into 0-day response mode. Otherwise, we talked a little bit about risk appetite at the very beginning. If you define that risk appetite and both the IT team and the security team are on the same page, the IT team is already remediating everything that you've agreed upon. So really, you shouldn't have to do much effort to automate that step because our patch solution, the Neurons patch management solution, is fed the same vulnerability intel as the RBVM platform. So think of that one as the 0-day response workflow. If I need to make something move faster, or I've identified something that was a gap, then you go through that manual step. But otherwise, the patch solution should already be configured for handling the same things that your vulnerability findings are picking up. So that kind of covers the automation question. Looks like the other questions that we had also were covered. It was more on the coverage of the products. So there, we really kind of talked about two products in today's conversation. There's the host-based vulnerability management, the RBVM module, and then we touched on some of the ASPM. So if your development teams are managing applications or things in there, you can license based on the number of hosts you need, the number of applications or containers, and so on that you need to manage. So all of that is adjustable in the licensing there. So buying up, however much you need for either side is very easy to do. And I think that wraps up our questions that we had from the audience today as well. So Vijay, thank you for the demonstration. And for everybody joining us here today, I know we ran a few minutes over, so thank you for sticking with us and continuing the conversation. And that's where we're going to wrap up for today. Thank you.